I'm so great to be here. I'm Juliana Moroni, and it's truly an honor to be with all of you as we kick off this very special edition of the World Circular Economy Forum, WCEF, held for the very first time here in Latin America and the Caribbean. This is the right environment for regional collaboration, both in policy and in business. We are here to explore and assess a strong set of strategies, technologies, and innovations that offer real solutions for the smart use of our planet's resources. We will also have the opportunity to discuss how the productive sector can go beyond operational efficiency to redesign its value chains by using renewable inputs, extending production and consumption models, and incorporating circular metrics into performance indicators. In terms of public policies, many countries in our region, including Brazil, have already adopted regulations that promote the principles and practices of the circular economy. For example, with the launch of the Nova Indústria Brasil, the country began shaping a new industry strategy based on innovation, ecological transition, and also decarbonization. This ambitious agenda includes incentives for the bioeconomy, digital transformation, and more circular production chains. All of this positions Brazil as a global reference in this movement. The solutions we'll see and discuss here are success stories that can be replicated, adapted, or even improved with each new technological and production evolution. We hope to leave this forum with integrated agendas, with clarity and conviction about the strategic role of the circular economy in transforming the way the world produces and consumes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests of honor and changemakers from around the world. It is truly an honor to welcome you all to World Circular Economy Forum 2025. We have a task ahead. Let's reshape our global economy to work for everyone and for the planet. This year's forum is particularly significant as it marks the first ever WCEF in Latin America. It would be hard to find a better setting for this conversation than Brazil and Sao Paolo, its economic powerhouse. Let me begin by addressing what is the essence of circular economy and why it matters now more than ever. At its core, circular economy represents an opportunity for businesses, communities, and the planet. It is about tackling inefficiencies and waste, keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible, and designing solutions that respect planetary boundaries. Simply put, it's about making more with less. Well then, why is circular economy important just now, maybe more important than ever? Let me share with you 3 insights drawn from Citra's work. First, data and AI-powered circularity. Digital data is arguably the most valuable resource of our times, and artificial intelligence its most transformative technology. Together, they are redefining circularity. Tools such as AI, blockchain, and digital product passports are no longer futuristic concepts. They are driving real change as we speak. These innovations are unlocking a new age of transparency, traceability, and intelligence in material flows. In Finland, Sitra has funded AI-powered solutions such as waste sorting for car recycling, yielding real-world impact and new business opportunities. The European Union is promoting the circular economy with regulations for digital product passports, and Sitra, in turn, has been working with innovators in promoting blockchain-based digital product passports. These passports act as standardized digital records, detailing a product's composition, origin, life cycle, and environmental footprint. Powerful tools for circularity and productivity. This brings me to my second point. Smart regulation is a necessary catalyst for circular economy. To accelerate the transition to circular economy, we need smart regulation. Bold policies can drive systemic change, making circularity the norm, not the exception. From the European Union's forthcoming Circular Economy Act to extended producer responsibility schemes in Asia and Latin America, one thing is clear: linear systems are losing their license to operate. Regulation should not be seen as a constraint, it is a catalyst. Smart regulation is well designed and balanced. It levels the playing field, incentivizes innovation, and protects the most vulnerable to environmental degradation. Third, we must recognize the essential role of circular economy for competitiveness and national security. In today's world of uncertainty, circularity is a matter of national security and strategic autonomy. What once began as niche sustainability initiatives for companies have now become central to boardroom strategies. Recent crises, from the pandemic to geopolitical conflicts, have exposed the fragility of global systems and supply chains. Circularity, on the other hand, strengthens resilience by keeping precious materials in use, designing long-lasting products, and improving reuse and recycling. And yet, despite all of this, we must confront a hard truth. Knowing is not action. We know that the circular economy has huge potential. We know it's a powerful tool to tackle the climate crisis. We know it can boost economic growth and create millions of new jobs. What we need is action over words. Today, the global circularity rate has dropped to just 7%. We are extracting and consuming more virgin materials than ever before. The gap between what we could achieve and what we are actually doing continues to widen. This gap is our call to action. Let this forum be more than a platform for discussion. Let it serve as a launchpad for action, to form new partnerships, to innovate together, to scale what works, to fund what truly matters, and to close the circularity gap before it becomes irreversible for our children.
I will be brief. Actually, I agree with the messages that Markus Neto has just given. Let me start by thanking the organizers for convening such a timely and important discussions here today, and I look forward to the conversation. I will start with presenting the European Investment Bank. Let's make some self-promotion here. The bank is the Bank of the European Union, and we are targeting investment projects throughout the world, but mostly in Europe, that have a high climate content, and it includes maximizing circular economy approaches in our projects. We have had last year a record level of circular economy projects worth 1.4 billion euros in our activity. Actually, today I would have four things that I would like to pass to you before leaving the floor for the conversation. The first one is, what I find interesting with circular economy solutions is that they contribute both to managing demand for material and resources and having an impact on securing supply. And actually, when you look at the way these projects work, they are managing demand by promoting better design, durability, repairability, etc. And they are also securing supply by increasing the share of secondary material that are in the economy, and by taking more control of key supply chains to maximize recycling, etc. And I think this is particularly worth for critical raw materials that are going to be discussed. And the capacity for circular economy to address both supply and demand is very important when it comes to critical raw materials, because critical raw materials are the backbone of modern economies. And what we can hope is that as demand rises, it is essential that we maximize circularity for the sustainable use of critical and strategic materials. So that's the interesting that I find in dealing with critical raw material in the context of circular economy. The second message is... Sorry, just change the microphone. That would be... That's much better. The second message is that, and we see that in particular in Europe, but it is true elsewhere. Most countries are heavily dependent on imports of those critical raw materials. And actually, this is an issue that we see as in Europe as energy independence, as critical raw material being an element of the strategic autonomy. And that's why looking at the supply chain is so important. And it goes from mining, processing, refining, recycling, material substitution, etc. We have at EIB an objective that is to increase significantly the amount of projects that we finance for critical raw materials in Europe or outside Europe, but in particular in Europe, of 2 billion euros per year. That is something that we think is going to help us design better products and also deal better efficiently with critical raw material and the risk they have to exhaust also the planet. The third element that has changed in the recent past in dealing with critical raw materials is that it is more and more seen as part of competitiveness and as part of an industry policy. And when you look at the Clean Industrial Deal that has been presented by the European Commission 2 months ago, it is absolutely clear that critical raw materials, reducing our raw material use, doing more circular economy, are objectives that are seen as absolutely essential if we want to increase competitiveness and to help reduce, to build an industrial policy in Europe. And I have a final point, and I'll stop there. All these changes are changes that are disruptive. And when you have, and everything related to climate is something that has the potential to be disruptive, as all transitions are. And that's why you cannot deal with critical raw material issues without having in mind clearly the need to have the just part of the just transition very well in mind. And that's what we do with our colleagues in other multilateral development banks, to the UNDP as well. This is something that is extremely important, that the transition is inclusive and just, and that we prioritize affordability for vulnerable citizens.
Dr. Ekins, you have been leading the recent IRP analysis looking at financing the responsible supply of energy transition minerals. Could you share some of the findings of this assessment? How should the financing of critical transition minerals be reformed to promote environmentally and socially responsible mining?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a great pleasure to be here, so thank you for the invitation. And yes, the International Resource Panel has been looking at this question of financing the responsible supply of energy transition minerals for sustainable development. So each of those elements is important, and we're looking at enormous financing. So the last estimate of the International Energy Agency for their net zero emission scenario was that these energy transition minerals would need investment by 2040 of $800 billion US. What is clear is that most of that investment will need to come from private sector sources, we therefore needed to understand in this report what mining is, and mining is a very complicated and capital-intensive business. Why investors choose to invest in mining, because they have lots of opportunities, and will they invest in $800 billion over the next 15 years? I'm an economist and not a financier, so I needed to get into finance. And I found that it has a certain aura of complexity, and people think they don't understand it, but actually it's very simple. Investors want a balance between risk and return. The higher the risk, the higher the return has to be. And mining is a very risky business and a very expensive business. We were interested in responsible mining, so mining with high environmental, social, and governance criteria, and that introduces more risk or less risk. The more risk comes from the fact that it might be more expensive to mine in that way. The less risk is that if you mine responsibly, you're much less likely to experience conflicts. And I've talked to enough mining companies now to know that the environmental, social governance factors are among their highest risks or opportunities. So there is an interesting balance there for investors that they need to take into account, that responsible mining may be more expensive, and in a very competitive commodities market, that means it may become more difficult to sell their products. On the other hand, it might avert conflicts and enable the mine to continue functioning in a normal kind of way, which will reduce costs. There's a very small part of the finance industry that might be called sustainable finance, which include investors who themselves individually believe that environmental, social, and governance issues are important, and they are prepared to take some of the risk of that kind of activity. That kind of activity grew very greatly over the sort of 10 to 15 years in the past, but is now experiencing a great loss of finance because of the kind of geopolitical situation in which we find ourselves. And in my view, that is a trend that needs to be reversed, and needs to be reversed quite quickly if we are to see the sustainable supply of these energy transition minerals, which are fundamentally important. And you may think, well, what's that got to do with circular economy? Well, in 5 or 10 years, it will have everything to do with circular economy, because once we have these minerals in our economies, we have to keep them there. But at the moment, we don't have enough of them, so we will need primary mining of these materials for at least the next 15 years. And that means that we need responsible finance for responsible mining.
And now we're going to hear about Mr. Mancin, the other side of the equation from the mining sector. We have heard from Dr. Ekins what have been the advanced thinking of financing for critical transition minerals. What are the perspectives of the industry? How have you been observing the growing demand for an adoption of circular innovations in the sector? And what's the current state of the circular innovation in the Brazilian mining sector? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We represent the mine industry. BRAN is the typical mine association. We have about 300 associates, 82 are mine companies. We representing 85% of the Brazilian mining GDP. It doesn't matter the newspapers you open now, you're going to see the information, critical minerals, geopolitics, war. Listen, critical minerals are up now. It's been used as a tool for peace or a tool for war. No? So we are in the middle of the hurricane. No? Mining in Brazil is a little bit not so big sector. We represent 4% of the economy here, but we are one of those 3 key sectors in the economy. We are investing now in Brazil $70 billion for the next 4 years. No? Some movements are very impressive. Mining is moving to the southeast, to the Amazon. When you move to the Amazon, Mr. Chair, problems arise. No? You have protected areas, you have indigenous areas. Listen, majority of the investments we are receiving goes to the new projects, very new projects, greenfield projects. But it's interesting, some new projects are requesting as a primary target tailings. For example, we have in Poços de Caldas, not too far from here, older exploration of uranium. It's possible to find rare earth elements. So people are applying to do primary mining on tailings that comes from uranium exploration. Very interesting because they are reaching uranium. The same case we have with niobium tailings. No, people are extracting rare earths, but cost a lot of money. No, as Professor Elkins said, mining is not for beginners. Mining is a very tricky business, long-term process. No. Transform circular economy in business is the trick. This is the answer. We have to transform this, but we have some problems, especially in terms of the profitability of the businesses. No? And of course, we have some technical limitations. Nowadays, it makes more sense to open a new mining because you could have more success than you try to implementing a recycling project, for example. And of course, there is a lot of difficulties to obtain good concentration of minerals in tailings. Why? Because they were processed in the past. We have good examples here in Brazil, Mr. Chair, relate to civil constructions, materials for bricks, materials for asphalt. We have good examples here for fertilizers. People could processing tailings from minerals and obtain fertilizers. Small numbers of metallics, very difficult to extract metallics. Why? Because the concentration is so low, no? But we have heard about good projects trying to obtain copper, for example, from tailings. Not so easy. We are in the middle of the hurricane, but the good part is mining is one of the answers. If you'd like to have climate change, solutions. If you like to have clean energy, you can only depend on mine sector. It doesn't matter the energy you are talking about will demand minerals. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and certainly we will build the solution together. I don't want to do the flag waving of Brazil, but Brazil is doing a lot in terms of circularity right now. There's a new policy law, there's 70 action points, but also we have in different sectors experiences that show very clearly, I think, in the textile sector, circularity alone has brought $480 billion in savings. So I hope that we can have that discussion and keep moving forward in this healthy ecosystem, and thanks for the dialogue. Now we're going to hear from Slendy Diaz from Colombia, and we've heard about the advanced trends in finance, the technological innovation towards circularity in the critical mineral sector. In what ways are countries already integrating circular economy approaches into the critical transition mineral life cycle? And if you could share some best practices from Colombia, what enabling environment, regulatory frameworks, incentives and disincentives have your government been promoting?
Thank you, Claudio. First of all, I want to thank UNDP team for this wonderful invitation, and to the team of World Circular Economy Forum. Public policies must be implemented to bring concrete solutions to real problems. The energy transition requires us to increase the efficient use of the energy at the same time that we increase the capacity to create and to bring non-conventional renewable energy sources and cleaner energies, because we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We do have to deal with the climate change, so they come together with all of that. In this sense, we must consider not only solar and wind energy, but also non-conventional renewable energy sources. In Colombia, we have regulation that, first of all, promote the energy efficiency, and on the other hand, we increase the capacity for non-conventional renewable sources by offering incentives. And we also have policies for mining formalization. Another point is that these incentives have increased the installed capacity of non-conventional renewable energy sources, and there are also incentives for cleaner technologies, which encourage the implementation of more efficient technologies for the mining and for the energy sector. As a result, we have increased the production of biofuels, hydropower, refuse-derived fuel, tar-derived fuel, while energy efficiency strategies have improved the energy productivity. I want to highlight some circular approaches to the life cycle of critical minerals. The first one, we can increase the productivity and the efficiency of existing mines by extracting several minerals. We can't have one mine per mineral. Minerals naturally are combined in the soil. So we can bring more minerals from one mine to reduce the extraction of dispersed minerals. Remember that the principal reason that we are losing biodiversity and the principal aspect that also is related to the climate change is the changes in the use of the land. So we can be, if we can be more productive for each mine, we can reduce the extraction of minerals by separate. Rather than discarding the tailings, as you mentioned, tailings can be recovered on-site or by a third party to recover copper, nickel, bring other materials, clays, and to produce other materials and to keep them in use in the market. It also helps us to create new jobs. Other alternatives that we have is to recover the minerals and the residual mine wastewater, or we can produce aggregates for construction and demolition waste to reduce the extraction of virgin raw materials. And I also find important to say that we need to produce more durable goods because we want non-renewable resources in use for longer. And it comes together with the alternative to provide services related to the life extension of the devices. Another important strategy is extended producer responsibility. And finally, the implementation of best practices, best available techniques, climate-smart mining, and rehabilitation strategies at the end of the life that can be done together with the communities.
Perhaps if you could, in 30 seconds, I don't know if you can do that, Dr. Atkins, answer, I think, the first question, one-liner on how we can measure impact of our performance towards just transition. I know it's impossible.
Quite impossible. All I can say is that over the recent years, we do now have systems for evaluating responsible mining. So whether we're talking about the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, IRMA, many mining companies are starting to evaluate their works according to these criteria. There was the Responsible Mining Foundation, which produced 2 really good reports in 2022 and 2023, looking at a number of mining countries and evaluating their performance against about 21 criteria. And there is the Responsible Mining Initiative. Or you can look at the International Council on Mining and Metals, which has 24 of the biggest global mining companies as members, including Vale, which is a member. And they have a consolidated mining standard, which they have tried to bring together different mining standards in order to be able to evaluate the performance of their members, and their members have to make commitments in order to follow these standards. So that's my hope for the future, that actually the mining industry itself is starting to address these issues, and with the environmental, social, and governance finance movement, we can get the money flowing into those companies that make those commitments.
This session is about the crucial role of cooperation among manufacturing industries in advancing the circular economy, which is the topic of the World Circular Economy Forum here in Sao Paolo, Brazil. On the material and process management side, this concept goes beyond recycling and is aiming to create a system where waste is minimized in the production step, and that also resources are continuously reused. It's more about waste management, it's more about recycling, it is about optimizing the use of resources collectively and not only individually. Key strategies for this include industrial synergies that can include utility synergies, value chain synergies, and also industrial symbiosis, shared services among tenants of the industrial park, as well as joint activities like training and research and development. This symbiosis and partnership brings significant benefits both for the companies, the local environment, but also the communities and the planet. And then we'll move on to continue on the role of industrial synergies. So basically, shared services and joint activities are integral to fostering circular economy cooperation in industries. And these include shared services. Industries can share services such as logistics, waste management, energy supply, utilities, water supply, etc., to enhance efficiency and reduce costs. This makes sense for the industries. For instance, shared logistics services can optimize transportation routes, reducing fuel consumption, but also emissions. If you think about Scope 3 emissions, most of them are coming from logistics. Moreover, joint training and R&D, research and development, collaborative training programs, and research and development R&D initiatives help industries to innovate and adopt circular practices. By sharing practical experience among the industries in the industrial park, we can learn more from practical solutions coming from the people that are facing the challenges. Of course, we need to bring in academia and science to support that, but the practical solutions are coming from the users and also the industrialists themselves. So industrial symbiosis takes industrial synergies a step further by creating a network where the waste or byproducts for one industry become the raw material for another. This is just the easiest example to explain symbiosis, but actually it's about sharing and optimizing, moving from individual solutions to collective solutions, either in terms of inputs, water, raw materials, energy, or outputs, the final products or the byproducts, waste, water, solid waste, and air emissions. Key element here is cooperation. We can have theoretical and technical solutions, but what matters is that the tenants be convinced about the value of this partnership. And this is where we see the merit of cooperation. And there are different folds of that. First, economic gains. Companies can save on raw material costs, services, and waste disposal fees. Environmental impact. Coming together, we can better reduce waste emissions to air and water and lower greenhouse gas emissions, and then contribute to healthier environments and the planet. Innovation and efficiency. Collaboration efforts often lead to innovation solutions and more efficient processes.
We know, because we have proved through the 53 years of cooperation that circularity can be a driver of innovation, and it can strengthen the local community, and it can benefit the climate and also the financial bottom line. So it's a win-win-win situation. And we also seen that you can, so to say, divide the outputs of an industrial symbiosis cooperation in hard values like resource savings, financial savings, and improved environmental KPIs, and also soft values like strengthen the local community, the way of doing more responsible production for the companies, and it also opens up new perspectives on how industries and companies can collaborate.
I am devoted to the free trade zones. And I would like to mention just a couple of ideas. And the first one is that the free trade zones are the perfect ecosystems to develop efficient circular economy programs. So this is our starting point. And there is also an idea, which is not mine, it's from one of our colleagues here in this event, and it's just, of course, we're all very committed to circular economy. Yesterday, the lady that was presenting, Juliana, she mentioned her very nice dress. It was bought like 20 years ago, and it was made of certain fabrics and blah blah blah. And then that was very nice when we all do it, and we carry our bottles and this and that, and of course everything contributes. But, and again, this is not my idea, this is somebody else's. The big impact is made by the companies, by the industry, and then by the big players, and that's why all these ecosystems we're going to be talking about in this panel came into force. And that's a very powerful idea that I would like to mention. And then in Colombia, these free trade zones, we have 115 free trade zones in 20 of the 32 regions of the country. And then they represent, and this is very interesting, 90% of the companies located in these free trade zones are small and medium enterprises, which tells you about, like, of course, all these, again, small and medium-sized companies all together in these ecosystems, they can do a lot. And for them, financially, makes sense being in a free trade zone and then working together in all these collaboration and these cooperation schemes. That's powerful. Since they are in these regions, they also bring a lot of social impact. And that's something that we should also bear in mind. We have been discussing with my colleagues here. There's a very, very nice example, Zona Franca del Cauca, which is located in one of the areas of the country that have been under a lot of pressure given to drug traffic, I have to say it, social issues, economical issues, and then, as the president of Andy, Bruce McMaster, has said in several occasions, you have like these little oases, right? These free trade zones that bring opportunities for these regions. And then they have also been very committed. We launched a survey last year that showed that about 70% of these free trade zones have a sustainability policy. About 50% have been working on energy cooperation schemes, and also in the management of waste, and then you name it.
In your opinion, as representative of the private sector, actually, how do you see the importance of these policy elements to encourage industries to implement circular economy solutions?
Well, this is a very interesting question, and I'm going to start like dividing what you just said, the question itself, because you said policy. And the first idea that comes to my mind is that that's very different from over-regulating. So it's different to have a policy, which is a long-term vision, or where we as a country or as a region, actually, or globally even, where we want to go at what are going to be the tools. What do the companies need to achieve those goals? And again, that's different from over-regulating. So that's the first idea. And then you said, how do you encourage? How do you support? Which brings me to say again, in a different manner, that also differs from imposing, from creating the obligation of being sustainable or the obligation of going into circular economy. The companies, their main purpose, of course, is being profitable, is creating value, is creating job places, is like expand all these positive elements of the economy, right? In a sustainable way, of course. But that's their goal. That's what the companies are aimed to do. So I will say, one, let the companies be. Let the industrial sector be. Okay. When you have this sector into a free trade zone, right, or an industrial park, this cooperation is going to be somehow natural. So the second element of this policy should be the right incentives. You need to give them incentives. How are you going to make them more profitable? How are they going to be more, how are they going to take more financial sense from it? And then you get the results. And then third, again, don't force them. Just don't force them. Create incentives. The incentives are going to do what they have to do.
We wanted to really know how much money is flowing to the circular economy, or more specifically to businesses that are active in the circular economy. Why? Because we just don't know where we are, and we need to track and to understand actually what is going on. So I have a little bit of a sneak preview today for you on this, and this might be a bit of an overwhelming graph, but sometimes the financial capital flows can be a bit overwhelming. So we released the executive summary of the Circularity Gap Report Finance already, and I'm not going to dive too deep into it because, as you can see, it can be a bit overwhelming. We did this exercise together with KPMG and the International Finance Corporation. And I just want to highlight basically two things on this. And that's first, one of the main insights that we have is that money is not flowing to where the impact is. How can we tell? We saw that, especially, you can look at transportation here, for example, is that most of the money is flowing to very conventional business models. Why transportation? We saw that most of the money is, in the end, car repair, car lease, which, in theory, are probably circular business models, but are those really the ones that really make the impact? That's the question. We did also see that if you look, for example, at the built environment, where we know from the Circularity Gap report, from the Global Resource Outlook, we know that there the most impact could be made because it's a very resource-intense sector. We see that a very, very tiny fraction is just focusing on the design and production phase, while there is actually the most impact to gain. So, for example, more bio-based materials and so on. The second thing that I really want to highlight is that in general, and you cannot take this from this graph, we see that less than 2% of global capital flows is going into circular economy activities. That, while actually every activity has some relation to resources. So this is a bit shocking. We also see that there was an overall increase of capital, of money flowing to circular economy since 2018, but it also peaked in 2021 and then, declined again. The question is, of course, why? We think that one of the main reasons is that the economics of the circular economy, unfortunately, often still do not work out. Why? We do not value resources accurately. Too many things are externalized. A second thing that we really see also in the financial sector is that the risks related to resources, supply risk and so on, they are not really being accounted for in existing risk models. And last but not least, I just think that the opportunity is not really understood.
We can share with all of you our experience with ProLade because I think it's very inspiring for how circular economy can work in different sectors. You know, when many people start talking about circular economy, it's something in there that all people are always thinking about recycling, waste management, and water treatment. And in the last years, we can discover and can show how different sectors are being collated and all the activities that they realize are very close to circular economy and how circular economy work for different sectors in all of the countries. Circular economy at the end is about to rethinking the process, the products, and consumption, and how we create value across the supply chain. So understanding this create an opportunity to the investment and to the financing and try to see how to work with circular economy to tackle all different problems like climate change, biodiversity, and nature that we have in this moment. ProLade, a Mexican producer of sustainable palm oil, exemplifies the integration of circular economy with the palm oil sector. So Luis, can you share with us what circular economy means to ProLade and how can the palm oil sector contribute to the development of circular economy?
Thank you, Marcela. Well, for us, circular economy is not a marketing term. Basically, it's a way of using our waste, we're going to call it waste, as a way of extracting value. Let me explain. Palm oil production uses 25 million hectares in the world. That's a reality. And each hectare produces 10 tons of waste per year. So it's a lot of waste and there's value in that waste. So we decided to reverse the way of looking into waste and how to do and extract value from the waste. So we implemented a pyrolysis system, a very simple system that has been around for thousands of years for humanity. And we produce biochar. Again, biochar has been in the world for many, many years. Actually, here in the Amazonians is where everything started. And biochar has 3 characteristics. The first one is that it contains the carbon for thousands of years. The second is that if it's put in the right type of soil, improves the nutrients and improves the way of microorganisms live in the soil, so we improve the soil. And third one is that you don't have to put that much fertilizer into the soil because you have more microorganisms And at the end of the day, that means that with less fertilizer, you will have exactly the same results. So just to give you an idea, if you do this pyrolysis system in an hectare, you would receive around $1,000 to $2,000 of extra income for that hectare. That's a huge amount. It's even more than what you receive in soybean or whatever crop you can put. 60% comes from the carbon credits, the corks. It's permanent sequestration. So that's why it's so valuable. The second comes from the cost avoidance of the fertilizers. And the third one is that your yield is going to improve. So if you put biochar in a soil, you will have between 20 to 30% extra production or yield. That means 6 million hectares of land can be reutilized for other purposes if we can do something about it. So at the end of the day, it's a way of doing a margin expansion thanks to the incorporation of pyrolysis into the system. And it's not a marginal error. Just to give you an idea, if all the palm oil industry converts into biochar all their waste, the pollution of 30 to 50 million cars can be avoided. It's not a marginal error. It's important for the environment.
Thank you, Luis. And I think that it's important to mention that ProLade is not only biochar, because you do a lot of things related with waste, water, and energy in your process. So I think it's a very good example of how circular economy functions alongside the oil product and on all to the supply chain, and how you take from waste that you produce and enter this like a new product. And you are the first in Latin America in the sector palm oil that doing that, no? So.
Yes, exactly. We also use the water that comes out of the system. We can produce methane, and we're producing electricity out of this. And anything that we can use to reduce cost, and that's what is very important. It has to be done at the end of the day. And we're not alone. Sugarcane, rice, coffee, forestry, all of them have a huge amount of waste that can be transformed easily and with not that much money into valuable things.
Okay, we know, and I'm sure that all people here know that adopting the circular economy face barriers for many companies. One of them is the lack of financing, and of course, the risk that we identify in these kind of projects, because it's very unknown, and you know, the financial institution, not all are ready to work with this. So that is the reason that in the IDB Invest, we start working with you and try to identify different financial instruments. And last year, we give you a loan for $50 million with the Canadian Climate Fund for the private sector and Finland LAC Climate Fund for a blended finance facility for ProLade. Can you share with us some of the experience about this, how difficult was this process, and how do you think that this can be replicated for other companies not only in the palm sector? I think this is open for different sectors.
I would say that all the circular economy projects have 4 challenges in front of them. The first one has to do with CapEx. CapEx comes upfront. So at the end of the day, you have to invest without any revenue, sometimes any idea if it's going to work. The second one has to do with a mismatch between the expenses and the revenues, because at the end of the day, it's going to take a while to have all the revenues, all the impact into your income, to be able to pay the loan, to pay your investors, or whatever structure you decide. The third one, and it's only for the circularity projects that are based in carbon credits. Carbon credits are not a sure thing. Corks, or permanent sequestration carbon credits, are very expensive right now, $120. but nobody knows in 10 years how much are they going to be valued, and that gives a lot of worrisome to the lenders. And the last one, and hopefully there's not that many risk managers around in the audience, but oh my God, you're the enemy, because risk managers never approve this kind of projects, because it's easier to say no than to say yes, to be honest. And the IDB Invest, and the blended facility with Canada and Finland, they were able and they were courageous enough to say yes to a project like this, not only because it was palm oil, but also because at the end of the day, we were based on all the income that we have. It was not only based into the circular economy projects, but for sure, it also helps that we stack all our income. Obviously, we produce palm oil and we produce a lot of it, and it's profitable. But also, we also have other sources of revenue like the carbon credits, the productivity, the reduction in cost. The second thing that is very important is that we, at the end of the day, we integrate the biochar into our own soil. We don't have third parties. We don't move around the biomass. That's very critical into any circular project. You cannot move around the things. So you have to do it inside, and we did that, and that's also very important. So at the end of the day, is something that the risk management of the IDB and Canada and Finland were able to process, and that was very helpful for us, and thank you for your support.
No, thank you, Luis. I think it's very important, make a spotlight in two things. Is you mentioned risk, and that is one of the things that we try to work with the blended finance facilities, try to support this kind of new business, because it's not new really, but we know that you have a lot of challenges. The other thing, something that Patricia mentioned about how do we include in the returns the impacts that we have with these kind of projects. And this gives us an open conversation about how we can define better or common KPIs for circular economy, so we can use more blended finance, try to show how these impacts working in the process in any company in circular economy, or how we can make possibly sustainability-linked loans or sustainability-linked bonds to support circular economy, but it's something that we need to work together and try to define how we can show these impacts and how we are included this in the, in the total cost and the capital, and we really measurement the projects. So thank you, Luis. I think Prolade is one of our favorite examples. You have a lot of things and you do a lot of things great, and we are very happy to support the process with you.
Well, thank you, and thank you because at the end of the day, the facility that was provided by IDB Invest gave us a lot of credibility. What we wish is that this facility is an example going forward for other industries and for other parts of the world, because it works. Just to give you an idea, the facility is basically a 10-year bullet loan, so they understand that it's going to take time for us to pay the main amount. And if you do the milestones that you are asked for, like investing in the right things, the interest rate goes down. So my board has the incentive to invest in circularity because we reduce the cost of the loan. And I have all the incentive to invest in circularity because at the end of the day, I understand that my profit is going to increase. But it's going to take a while, and they understand it. So that's why having the right recipe is key for this.